Good evening and welcome to the Buddy Martin Show, where tonight we're going to break it down with some of the beat guys.
Yes, it's time again for Buddy Martin. Call him up and tell him what you're thinking, but be kind because he's doing the best he can.
Better, stronger, faster.
Mama says that alligators are ornery because they got all them teeth but no toothbrush.
Hey, what if the voice calls while you're gone?
Take a message.
Bye!
You ready, champ? I'm ready for this my whole life.
I'm incapable of small talk. But that's why you love me, right?
Kind of intimidating to be in the presence of so many great athletes.
Good evening and welcome to Rocky Top Week. I'm not going to sing it. I'm just barely going to say it, and we'll talk about Florida going to Knoxville, returning to Neyland Stadium for a return match in a game that means nothing to most people, but everything to the two teams and coaches and schools. Very, very important game. Well, today, Dan Mullen was asked about whether or not this game defines the season. He said, no, it doesn't define this season, but I got news for you, folks. As of Saturday, 48 hours from now will be about halftime. As of Saturday, we will be 1/3 of the way through the regular season. The season we waited for all summer will be 1/3 over, and a loss at Tennessee would be devastating, and it would define the first 33% of the season. I can hardly get the words out. So, yeah, it's important. It's an important game. It's a big game. And right now, every game is big to this team. And Florida, a 4.5-point favorite. Tonight in the program, we got three beat men who cover this team regularly, who have their thoughts on the teams and the game. And we'll be talking to the Minister of Information any moment, Graham Hall of the Gainesville Sun, who will be joining us in just a moment. Then we've got Zach Abolverdi. I can say it right. Abolverdi, all right? It's only taken me 2 years to get it right. Zach recorded earlier with us, the new editor of Gator Bait magazine. And then Mark Long of the AP joins us, the back third, to give his thoughts about Florida, Tennessee, a game that, as I said, means nothing to too many people, but it does mean a lot to the Gator Nation and the Vol Nation. So, good evening. Richie's already talking about the Gators going in there and win. David Soderquist says, great lineup tonight. All right. Jake Allen's got his new phone. He's fired up, ready to go. A hand clap from Jennifer Lay and Becky Carlisle. Also, Robert Dotson says, dilly dilly. Beth Laura, dilly dilly. And also Paul Bell, Charles Buchan, Donald Wilder. Jimmy Clements says, let's talk. Let's do that, Jimmy. That's a good cue. We'll go right into our talking mode, and we'll go up with our first of our three heavy hitters, checking in with Graham Hall from the Gainesville Sun, who I believe is out leaving a party about right now and should be jumping aboard any moment. We'll see. Yeah, Jimmy says, let's talk. Indeed, let's talk, Jimmy. Sounds like Graham is still doing his thing right now, and he's going to a going away party, so he might be a couple of minutes after the hour, so we'll try him back momentarily. We'll get back to your comments. Sean says, what up? Well, what up, Sean, is Florida, Tennessee. I know Gator fans are waiting to find out which one of these teams, which team is going to show up. And, of course, will there be a defense that shows up? That's the big question for Gator fans. Kevin Rowell, dilly dilly to you, my friend. Knoxville or bust, moonshine, Tula's Vols. Well, we'll get into that in just a minute. I believe we've got our friend back on the line. He's just leaving the party now, and he'll be appearing momentarily and magically via Skype on our split screen to talk about the Florida Gators, a subject he knows very well and covers very well. I can't see you yet, but you'll appear here momentarily. I have no doubt that you'll appear. I've got I got a shot of you, but I don't have you on my screen. Here you go. All right. There you go, man. Yeah, I'm doing good. How you doing, man?
Doing well. Got back about 25 minutes ago. So
all right.
Here talking Gator football with you as Florida prepares for their first road game of the season.
Yeah, that's I just said earlier, you think the season's going fast. After 48 hours from now will be about halftime, and by the end of the night, a third of the regular season will be over, my man. Think about it.
It seems like that for sure. I mean, this is going to be the part of the schedule, though, that could feel a little bit long, buddy. I mean, the first few games of the season always run by pretty quick when you're playing some of those cupcake opponents that, you tend to get kind of in the beginning of the schedule. But, you look at Florida's schedule coming up, Tennessee, Mississippi State, LSU is up to number 6 in the country, Georgia's number 2, South Carolina, we know they're good, Missouri can put up points. I mean, it could feel pretty long. The schedule is getting pretty tough here if Florida slips up at some of these games. And, they got back-to-back road tests coming up, and we're really going to kind of see what this team is worth now that we're getting a pretty complete picture of their defense getting David Reese back on Saturday.
Well, that's significant, and, we still don't know why we didn't see him last week. Obviously, we talked earlier in the week about this, and, I mean, he really wasn't needed. No reason to use the guy. He wasn't 100%, and why put him out there. But he's such an important part of this defense, not just his recognition. He's a good reader of offensive formations, also for just his leadership and being a run stopper and something that they needed badly against Kentucky. And when you got your although they got some pretty good play out of their reserves, I will say. But the bottom line is, I think you need this guy, and as you know, you correctly defined the defense as lacking in the middle and, of course, on the back end with the safeties, which they have to change. So, anyway, size it up for us. You've been following the reports all week. You went to press conferences and kind of break it down. Let's get the landscape squared away. I said today to your friend Zach, and we'll hear that interview in a minute, you don't hear much about who's playing at Tennessee these days. And when you pronounce a quarterback's name, if you get it right, I can't even get it right. I want to say Guantanamo. That's not it.
Yeah.
And you put that name down with other names like Peyton Manning and Heath Schuler and on and on and on. T. Martin. It's not a name that exactly shakes fear into the heart of the opponent. So tell me what you know about Tennessee. Tell me what you think is how they're going to line up against Florida.
I think the big thing is there are a lot of similarities between the two programs right now, just from a situational standpoint. You look at Tennessee and Florida, both programs that not only have new coaches who kind of come in with a lot of acclaim. Jeremy Pruitt, coming from the Saban tree, has kind of revitalized that program that has, like Florida, struggled with some coaching hires since, early dominance in the 90s and I guess even the early 2000s for them. I think the biggest thing that you look at when you look at their offenses is two teams that need to establish the run to be successful. You have very, very young quarterbacks in Guarantano and Felipe Franks, guys who are doing some things better from last year so far, but they're not going to be able to go out there and win an entire game on the strength of their arm. You need to see whichever team establishes the run first early on Saturday, I think is going to have the upper hand throughout the rest of the game. Florida, you would think that, if their offensive line does well, stops the rush, blocks well, and Jordan Scarlett can get going, LaMichael Pirine, Damian Pierce can get going, then you have to think that Florida is at an advantage because then Tennessee's going to need to throw to beat them. The biggest thing, we just talked about leadership. Obviously, that helps with the front seven. C.C. Jefferson as well helped with the front seven. But David Reese is the guy. I mean, you look how many freshmen are out there. Trey Dean, all these freshmen who are making their first vital contributions, James Houston. When they don't know their assignment, David Reese knows everybody's assignment. James Houston said that leadership aspect has been missing for the team for the last 3 years. So the last 3 weeks. It's entirely possible that on Saturday, Florida, their defense looks a lot more sound. They're not having all these missed tackles. Rayshaw Jackson won't be playing as much with Reese back. They could look a lot better. So there are a lot of unknowns. But again, this all comes down to the running game. Whoever establishes the run and whichever defense can stop the run, that is going to be the big key for the game for me, and that's what I'm looking for from the first quarter onwards, buddy.
Yeah, a lot's going to be focused on, obviously, on the quarterback. He's got to get he's definitely got to get a road win, and he's got to play and not give the game away for sure. I don't know how you handicap it. We talked about it last night, the kind of quarterback club. And we see this as you want to just talk talent because you don't know about execution, how many turnovers will be, etc. Florida's got a better talent level than Tennessee's got. It is obviously a home field advantage, although that's factored in the 4.5 points. And you think, okay, if that's the case, how should this game play out? And that all depends on the arena. I don't know if they're going to have 100,000 there or not. I suspect they'll be close to it, and they're trying to get that program turned around. But right now, I just don't know which team is going to show up for Florida, because I'll tell you what, when you compare, this is what's always hard. You look at Kentucky. What happened? Usually when you get past the season a little bit and look back, you can say, well, look, Kentucky was better than we thought. They had very good a front line, good blockers. They had a good running game and a quarterback in Terry Williams who were better than we thought, and they turned out to have a good year. We don't know that yet. But we were kind of surprised to know that Kentucky was that good, or was Kentucky that good? We're going to find out some of that this weekend against Mississippi State. We're the 10-point underdogs. Now we look at Tennessee and Florida. How will this play out? You think Florida should have won this game by a touchdown, I think. But then on the other hand, maybe Florida, who beat Colorado State, benefited from the hot weather, 108 degrees, and all of a sudden all the turnovers and special teams came into play because the offense didn't win that game. So now how do we figure that part out? It's all part of the assessing as you go, analyzing these teams, and I just don't know how good this Florida team is yet. But I think Florida should win this game. Does that sound right to you?
I do think Florida wins this game. I think that there's if things go awry, it's, again, more of an indictment of Florida than I think, like you just said, Tennessee may be better than we thought. You look at Tennessee top to bottom, I mean, they don't have depth. They have more depth issues than Florida has. Their secondary is very weak. They have a good running game. That's the best part of their team. They have an inexperienced quarterback. You look at, obviously the game's not won on paper, but you look at the game on paper, and it would seem that if Florida does enough things right and limits mistakes and avoids those mental errors that we have seen they are kind of prone to, even more so when they go into a hostile road environment. If they can do those things where they just stick to their game plan, Felipe limits his, right, turnover, limits his mistakes. Tennessee's not going to beat Florida on Saturday. Florida is going to beat Florida. If they stick to their game plan, if they don't miss tackles, if there's not, 20 missed tackles for 168 yards or whatever it was in that opener. If those things don't happen, Florida should win this game. But, it is SEC football. Anything can happen. We were saying during the Kentucky week that if Florida did this, this, and this, they should beat Kentucky soundly. And then, Kentucky comes out there and is a better team. So there always is that unknown factor. But I would honestly be surprised if Florida doesn't win by more than a touchdown Saturday, buddy. All
right, let's line up the questions for the Minister of Information. And here we go. Tracy says, what we need is to liven up football. It's the more safeties. You agree with that? Actually, the safety is obvious. We talked about it earlier in the week when you told me about Sean Davis. Explain who's coming back and whether or not they'll help Florida.
Yeah, Sean Davis is not, it doesn't look like he's going to be back this week. They were hoping to get him into practice yesterday. He didn't fully participate in practice yesterday, which means he didn't fully participate today. No use in using reps with him in the first string, or even using him in any even non-contact situations if you're not going to get him back at this stage in the week. So that's another tough situation for Florida, because that's a guy who probably should be starting. C.J. McWilliams will return. He should play a little. He should probably rotate between corner and safety, but a guy who has limitations with his size, and then a lot of inexperience that should probably get better as the season goes on. Brad Stewart, a former 4-star safety, Jawan Taylor, a guy out of Alabama who every program wanted. So there's a lot of talent, a lot of potential there. We're waiting to see if it turns into talent, but they have given up some big plays. The safety is the safety issue is certainly a big factor. You've seen Florida even run some sets where they're using 5 DBs to limit the zones, which in turn limits the potential mistakes that the safeties could make, which is going to give them a little more confidence and ease their learning curve, so to speak. So that's definitely something to watch going forward. Okay. Probably a position that could actually get better as the season goes on. All
right, we're going to try to knock these out next 2-3 real quick because we're running short of time, and I want to get this in. Jennifer has a question about any news on the infractions. There are level 3s at Georgia. What do you know about that? Anything?
I haven't heard anything about that.
There's a bunch of level 3s. which I think is a minor, as I recall.
Yeah. The best thing you can do this day is tattle on yourself if it's nothing serious, because then it's kind of like running mom and telling her that you broke something.
Right. And they self-reported, I believe. So
that's the way to do it. You don't want the NCAA spending money, because then they have a little, they're a little vindictive.
Exactly. I won't get into too much about the recruiting right now, because it's not time for that. We'll talk about that another time later on. Yep. We have a few other questions here for you. Let's see. I've got a question from who had this question earlier. Wait a minute, I got a bunch of Graham questions at the bottom. Hold on a second. Any special thoughts about Dameon Pierce? More carries? Donald Wilder wants to know.
Oh, I think we've talked about this as well. It's a very unique situation where they've got to keep Jordan Scarlett happy, send a message that, there is seniority on this team while setting Dameon Pierce up as the future, which it certainly looks like he is. You look at LaMichael P. Ryan, Jordan Scarlett, both probably going to leave for the NFL after this season, which means you got a Malik Davis coming back trying to prove himself, which means Dameon Pierce is going to be the number one running back next year if everything plays out the way it is right now. So certainly something that you want to watch, and I think that as the season goes on, to answer your question, Dan Mullen and Greg Knox are going to put an increased emphasis on getting him some more carries, building him up, while, again, treading that fine line between not, upsetting the rest of the running back room.
Yeah. Shout out to you from Ningbo, China. Roger Burns says Graham is the best. Again, China fans. This is a question from Kevin Rowell, who says, which is more true this weekend, Graham? Florida has a running back go over 150 yards, or Franks throws for 250 yards?
I'm going to go with Franks throws for 250 yards, because I think, again, Tennessee's secondary is very weak. There is going to be, I think you're going to see some big plays this week, more so than you've seen the rest of the rest of the season. But the only thing that, the more I think about it, that could limit that from happening is you look at, Colorado State. If things go well for Florida, they establish the run, Franks isn't going to throw the ball more than 18, 20 times at most. I mean, that would have to be 4 or 5 big plays. I think he does hit right around 200 yards. I think that Florida is probably only going to have about 350 yards of offense total. So probably those statistics fall just a little bit short of 150 rushing yards, 250 passing yards. But the big key, if you're Florida, is you have to have a balanced offense.
You got to have more than 44 plays. I don't think, by the way, Tennessee's going to shorten the field and try to run the ball against him. Okay, we're 2 more real quick. Over under on number of touches for Kadarius Toney.
I think he gets 6 touches.
6?
Wow. Saturday. I think that they're going to try and use him twice in the backfield in some extent, and you have to find a way to get him the ball. I don't know. You saw the wide receiver screen in the very first game, how well that worked. Kadarius Toney is ideally the guy who can get the ball and then make someone miss in the flat. That seems like an ideal play for him. I think that Florida, Dan Mullen does have a learning curve as well. These are new players, a whole new, toolbox for him that he's finding out which socket fits in what and so on and so forth. And Kadarius Toney is going to be one of those guys who's going to get a lot more reps pretty soon. All
right, real quick, Cody Fowler wants to know, I talk about the uniforms, that'll be it. Cody Fowler wants to know, is there any advantage one way or the other, knowing that Chris Rump now at Tennessee and Larry Scott and Charlton Warren at Florida, does that make any difference?
Well, no offense to Chris Rump. I mean, he's a very good recruiter, very good defensive line coach, but when it comes to developing talent on the defensive line, I mean, there are some guys who just don't respond to his development. I mean, there's guys who do say that they haven't learned a lot of the fine-tuning things that go into playing the position, what to do with your hands, your footwork. That wasn't emphasized under Chris Rump, and so if I'm Florida, I'm a little bit encouraged that he's there. I think he would know what to expect from him. I think he would know what type of moves the defensive line is doing. C.C. Jefferson can say, this guy's probably doing this in this situation because I was doing that a year ago. So I think that is an advantage for Florida, and I think that Sal Sunseri has a better resume. I mean, look at the NFL, look at the college. I think he's got a better resume than Rump. All
right, going out, we have questions about the uniform combination, what's it going to be, and David Baldoff wants to know, and I can show you a picture. You can't probably see it there, but this is the locker room. It says the Gators sent this out today. It looks like all white for Neyland Stadium.
That'll be very interesting because, Tennessee does a very good job doing the orange and white checkerboard. That's one of the things you have to give them some credit for. I mean, the fans organized that. themselves. I think the tickets say what color you should wear, but they abide by that pretty religiously. And there will be some white in the stands, and any Florida fans who show up wearing white should probably wear some blue.
Yeah, you know what else? I think if you were smart, you wear a checkerboard uniform in there, and they wouldn't be able to see you when you went in the end zone. Oh, it's just a joke. By the way, do you know who started that tradition? A former Florida Gator, Doug Dickey of Tennessee, started that whole thing with the checkerboard and the horse. So there you go. A little history there for you. Hey, Minister of Information doing his job as usual. Appreciate it very much, Graham. I guess you'll be in town this week, so we'll catch up. And
I'll still be doing the work for the game as well. And read my column on Gator Bait Magazine. I know you're talking about what Spurrier did for the Tennessee rivalry in 1990 and how Dan Mullen and Jeremy Pruitt, some things that they could do to amp it back up again. So thanks for having me on, buddy.
Thank you. And I've got Zach on coming up. And by the way, I've got Steve Spurrier on tomorrow talking about that very thing so on our show. So Thank you, buddy. I appreciate it. All right?
Thanks, everybody.
All right. There he is, the Minister of Information. Graham doing his thing as he does so well. Always appreciate him. And coming up in just a minute, his buddy is going to be on the program. And that would be Zach Abolverdi. I'll get it right in a minute. But first, let's take a little bit of a break here while I turn my phone down. My iPhone just decided it wanted to start talking. Isn't that funny how that happens? Does that ever happen to you? Music breaks out, all kind of things happen. So let's do this. Let's go ahead and hear from these folks and a couple of quick words, and we'll go play our interview with Zach Abolverdi. Sportswear. By the way, just a quick word about Rinstar Medical Research. You see up on the screen is this Rinstar Star of the Week, Scott Bradley Trophy Player of the Week, and it's Cam Orth of Buve Holtz High School in Gainesville. Congratulations. He's on the watch list. And Rinstar, of course, salutes all the young athletes and all of its community. They are known for their commitment to the community. They have a high-quality, patient-centered clinical research facility where they do all kinds of cutting-edge research. Rinstar has been doing this for a long time. Since 1998, over 600 studies, clinical studies, and they do this stuff under the regulation of the FDA. Safety is closely monitored, and that information goes out to the biomedical companies and medical companies to study Alzheimer's disease, psoriasis, osteoarthritis, migraine, and fibromyalgia, along with other conditions that affect our community. So they're all over that kind of stuff. So if you want to be involved in the clinical research, be a part of that, you can call them at this number in Ocala, 352-629-5800, or go online to Rinstar Medical Research, where it says, Rinstar Medical Research, seeking tomorrow's answers to the health questions of today.
No one ever plans a car accident. Having a plan after you've been in one, however, can make a world of difference. Daniel L. Hightower has been fighting for accident victim justice in Ocala and statewide since 1976. After meeting with Dan and his team, you'll know your case matters, that you matter, and that Dan will fight hard to get you just results. If you've been severely injured through no fault of your own by a careless or reckless driver, you need Daniel L. Hightower.
Daniel L. Hightower, lawyer fighting for accident victim justice since 1976. I want to tell you about Rinstar, about Center State Bank, which is also big time in the community on customer service and community service. You see the beautiful building there where we had our Ocala Quarterback Club meeting, and this was quite an evening. We had with Steve Spurrier there too. In fact, we did our book signing there, and we had Megan Mullen there in the preseason of the Quarterback Club. They're also a bank, by the way. You forget because their facility is so beautiful. This one here is one of just 82 locations in 30 Florida counties. They have a second floor. They let you have it for special events. All you got to do is pay the cleaning or whatever. And they are another example that how they reach out to the community. They also believe in the core values of being locally market driven with a long-term horizon on their financials, world-class service, relationship banking, and faith in family. So check them out online, CenterStateBank.com, for one of the places closest to you. This is my bank over in Silver Springs Boulevard in Ocala. It's Center State Bank, centered on community and customer service. Okay, earlier in the day, we talked to the new editor of the Gator Bait magazine, who's also a new daddy again, Zach Abolverdi. All right, time to go to our split screen hotline and talk to a guy I have not spoken with, and while so much has happened in his life since that time, and I can only say wonderful, bless you, congratulations, and all the things that goes with being a father again, a new baby girl, and a new job as the editor of Gator Bait magazine. Zach Abolverdi, congratulations and welcome back to the show, my friend.
Back in the Gator Nation Kingdom.
You got it. You were the first. When we started all this stuff. That time you were in SEC country, and you were knocking them dead with all the streaming you were doing and stuff. And since that time, you're hosting the afternoon show, the tailgate, and of course now you're doing this editor job. Man, you're a young guy to be an editor. What's that like? You excited?
I love it, buddy, and it's it's really kind of right up my alley. Being able to write now magazine style kind of features. Those are the type of stories I like writing. I like being able to take my time and kind of really dissect the week and what I want to write about and what I feel like is important to go into a magazine. So it's just a different type of deal. It's kind of a new niche for me and a way to kind of do something different than everyone else. So I've really been enjoying it. And it's also kind of the perfect gig, with the newborn as well.
How many does that make for you now? 2?
Yeah, 2.
Yeah.
And, we have 3 in our family. Me and my wife both have 9-year-olds. So
right, there you go.
So we got the girl.
Got 3.
Kind of bring us all together.
Well, I tell you what, it's gonna be fun. I had 2 girls and a boy. So, listen, that's great. Now, listen, here's the deal. You're coming along at a pretty interesting time. Some of us were lucky to saddle up and ride in certain eras. I was really blessed to be able to be and see the things I saw with Spurrier as a player and a coach, to see that first national championship game, to go through the Urban era. I know people don't like to mention his name. I still respect him as a football coach, and to have the national championship teams, and to have in about 2008, 2009, Gator Nation was on top of the world just about in terms of interest and what love and you name it. Things change. But now, you never know with Dan Mullen. You may be saddling up with a guy that's going to take Florida back to the national championship game again.
Well, I'm with you, buddy, because, I grew up here in Gainesville, obviously, so I grew up on the Spurrier when Meyer was here. Those were my high school years at Gainesville High School, so imagine how fun it was to be in this town around the program. And then, decide to pursue the journalism career, and Florida kind of fell off as a program after Meyer, and then my first year on the beat was 2012 as a credentialed media member, and Florida goes 11-1, and I'm thinking, buddy, here we go again. New coaches in town, they just have double-digit wins, and then ever since then it hasn't been that. And it's been a struggle, but I think that Florida's finally got the guy that's going to take them back to where they need to go. And despite the early season loss to Kentucky, some of the things that haven't looked the greatest, I personally see a lot of progress with this team, a lot of progress with Felipe Franks, but the special teams is night and day, and the fact that they've been able to make that much of a difference so early kind of shows you the strength of this staff and how much they're getting guys to buy in. And the progression on offense and defense will come a little bit down the line, but the fact it's showing up on special teams already, I think, is a good sign.
It's a little bit of a difficult thing to read with Colorado State, a team I thought might cover their points. I'm not a gambler, but because they did beat Arkansas, and Florida was struggling with offense, and you think, how many points can the Gators put on the board offensively? And I figured probably 4 touchdowns, right? Maybe 4 in the field goal, 31. And I was pretty sure, I thought maybe Colorado State could just score 2 touchdowns or whatever. Bottom line, it didn't happen. But one of the things you got to be careful about in fool's gold is that you look at the score, and the offense didn't produce all those touchdowns.
Yep.
And there was 108 on the field or something, highest swamp in history. And those guys from Colorado, where I used to live, from altitude, coming down there in that swamp in that fourth quarter, that's why you saw people breaking through the line, scoring long touchdowns and stuff. And you saw mistakes because the heat will get on your mind. Now, I'm not diminishing anything Florida did. I'm just saying, what do you think? Were they that good, or they got some work to do against the Tennessee?
Well, you saw the tweet from Chris Doran, buddy, I'm sure, early in the week where he said, warned Gator fans, basically, former Gator receiver and SEC Network analyst, don't be fooled by the score. That the quarterback was still late on his throws, that wide receivers still can't get open against man coverage. The O-line looked better, but, he questioned because it was an inferior opponent. And then he had some criticism of the running back rotation and Kadarius Toney not getting touches. I had a lot of people call my radio show this week, buddy, and complain about those comments. I thought Chris was spot on with every critique that he had in that tweet. But again, you're talking about a team that's in its third game with a new staff. Still a lot of scheme changes that have happened. But I go back to Frank's. There are times, buddy, watching him in the first few weeks that he still does the things that he did as a freshman that drive you nuts, that maybe give you doubts as a fan or as an observer about if he, can do it moving forward. But with that being said, you can't ignore, some of the statistics that he's put up and the fact that he's thrown 9 touchdown passes in 3 games, which matches his total from all last year. That's real progress. I don't care who the opponents were. He had those same teams that he played against last year and couldn't score like that. So I put stock into the fact that, he's gone out there and had 200-plus yard games, that in the game against Colorado State, even, regardless of the opponent, he had a stretch where he went 8 for 9.
Yeah.
Buddy, could he go 8 for 9 last year? I don't think
no,
so.
He did at the end of the game, though, and that was impressive. And I'm on the air on the side of give the guy a break right now because I know he's still struggling. He's going to quarterback school. He's really only about the 9th grade. And he's got to learn, and he's got to learn how to study and how to, and how to take. And I loved what last week when Mullen, actually this week in the press conference, when he broke it down for us about a quarterback and what he has to do, the time it takes to process, 10 seconds to do this, or all these reads, get them in the right formation, and still lead them and execute. There's a lot going on there. As he pointed out, it's all about reps. Yeah. He said he will have played how many games now after this? He's got just one season under his belt, basically, is what he's got. So I'm going to wait. I'm a wait and see guy on him. And I think when you start calling for the other guy to be the quarterback, it's a detriment to your program and to your players and your fans. Now, if this is 6 games in and he still can't correct those mistakes, and Florida's not winning games, losing games because of him, get him out, put somebody else in. But so far, he's done okay. And I think Mullen's right. He hasn't done anything to lose the job right now.
Yeah, and I love that you mentioned the breakdown because it is fascinating to listen to Mullen at the podium, right, buddy?
Yeah,
he doesn't give BS coach speak. I mean, he actually gives some analysis and makes you understand his frame of mind. I love how he broke down Felipe's interception and what happened on the play, saying, he was late on the read. And if he would have threw the ball on a line and threw it on time, it's a big play. But he got on Felipe on the sideline. He coached him up. He critiqued him on it. He didn't, get him discouraged and stray away from the play. What does he do, buddy? He comes back to it later in the game, calls a similar play, and what does Felipe do? It was a 38-yard touchdown throw to Van Jefferson. He threw it on the line, and it was a perfect strike. The fact that Mullen did that in a game and talked about it with us shows that, that's real live in-game improvement that you can look at. And I think that's great because let me say this. I think that with the last staff, if Felipe goes up there and throws a pick on a play, I don't know if they go back to that play. I think that was kind of their mentality maybe sometimes about how they tried to work with Felipe or deal with the game plan. I love how Mullen coached him up, went right back at it. That's the mindset you got to have.
I've heard a lot of coaches break down quarterbacks over the years, by many years. At Florida, I think Mullen was as eloquent about that as any coach I've ever heard in Florida talking about how to play the position of quarterback. And then I'm talking about Spurrier, too. Spurrier knows it. He didn't actually analyze it out loud that way. But, I mean, he told you right there. So it's a good lesson. Now, in the remaining minutes we got, we all know what's facing Florida, the so-called rejuvenation of the Tennessee Vols. We'll see about that in the Neyland Stadium. I think they're going to have 100. I don't know. What's that landscape look like to you, and how will this Florida team perform against their vaunted rival of old?
Yeah, at the end of the day, buddy, I still look at this as a series where Florida's won 12 of the last 13 games. Their last trip to Knoxville, that winning streak got ended, but it shouldn't have got ended. I mean, Florida had that game. I think that even though they didn't play better, they were clearly the better team that year because they went to Atlanta. I mean, they were the one that ended up being the representative of the East. And I say that because I still think regardless of the coaching changes, the fact that both programs have new head coaches for only the second time in the history of the series that's happened, I think you have to put a lot of stock with that into what does the personnel look like, what have they done in recent years, and I still think that Florida is the better team. They have more advantages with the personnel matchups, and I like Dan Mullen and his staff and the coaching advantage over Jeremy Pruitt. I think that he can do potentially a good job at Tennessee. He seems like a right fit. Talked to Jesse Simonson from Rivals.com today, who covers the Vols. He's really, high on Jeremy and the plan that he's kind of putting in place there, but he doesn't have the track record that Dan Mullen does. He's been in these hostile environments like Neyland Stadium as a coach at Mississippi State. He's going to know what it takes to get his team prepared for a game like this. This is Jeremy Pruitt's first rodeo, and I'm not sure if he's going to be able to win.
It's funny that of all the people I've heard talk about this Tennessee team, other than the SEC media days, no one's mentioned anybody but Jeremy Pruitt. And I would say that, if you ask the average Gator fan to name you 3 players on the Vols, I'm not sure they could do it.
Yeah.
It's a kind of a faceless team, isn't it?
It is, and I think their quarterback Garantano has shown some improvement through the first 3 games, but they are. I mean, they're a team that in a program that's really fallen off the map. I know you look at the stats, and they seem like they're on the same par. I think that Tennessee's recruiting rankings and where they finished some years under Butch Jones a little bit inflated by the number of guys that they signed in some of those classes. They didn't have top 10 signing groups, and I think that that's showing with the talent that they have. And like you said, but they don't have a lot of household.
Okay, we'll cut that a little short because we got Mark Long coming up. Zach Abolverdi will play the rest of that tomorrow at Football Friday. Don't forget tomorrow we're on at 11 o'clock tomorrow in the morning. We're going to do our picks. We'll have Joe Williams, Tom Schmitz, maybe Terry Bradshaw, and others who set the table for you for Knoxville. Before I go to the phones and talk to our friend Mark Long up there, I want to tell you about Mark's Prime. It's their goal to create a special, unique dining experience that please your palate and soothe your soul with the finest beef, the freshest seafood, premium wines, and naturally fresh vegetables. I'll be there tomorrow night with my friends, and I may have to try that dish right there, that lobster and that beautiful beef. So check them out. You can go online to marksprimesteakhouse.com. Kyle, you can call them at 352-336-0077. Gainesville, 352-402-0097. By the way, ask about their gift cards. It's great for the holidays. One of the great ways to say thank you. A place to go. I consider one of the best restaurants in Florida. I've eaten in many New York steakhouses, and I can tell you Mark's Prime Steakhouse and Seafood is right up there with them. So check them out. Mark's Prime Steakhouse and Seafood. You're going to be glad that you did. Final thought here as I talk about this to you. You need some meals cooked in a hurry? Well, here's the way to do it. Jennifer Lay's got all kind of stuff. For cooking, for putting for keeping leftovers, for tailgating. This is just one of the things that she features. Check it out right now. Go to jenlay.my.tupperware.com. Look at some of the mini items for Christmas gifts. She's got them there. Tupperware, of course, is a long-time brand. We all know about Tupperware. Our families have had it for years and years. If you have an organization that wants to do a fundraiser, Tupperware gives 40% of all sales proceeds back to the organization. Just want to shop, that's okay. You can do that too. Go to genlay.my.tupperware.com to purchase your product or search Tupperware Gen on Facebook. Tupperware, the perfect way to serve your GNA tailgate spread. All right, we're going to go up here and talk about, see if we can get our friend online here, Mark Long of Associated Press, who covers the Jaguars. He had quite a week, as well as the Gators, and see what he's got to say about this weekend in Knoxville, Tennessee, where the Gators will be trying to get their first SEC win of the year. And listen, you think about this, have this third of the season being a third of the way over, and you got to get down to business. As I said earlier, as we pick up with Mark Long, Dan Mullen asked today whether or not this is to define his season, this Tennessee game. Well, no, it won't define his season, but it will pretty well define his SEC season after the first 4 games. I can't believe that the season will be over. Will be a third over by Saturday night. Joining us on the program now is the Associated Press superstar who flies in airplanes, jumps. I hope he didn't jump out of these airplanes. This is the only picture I got of you, Mark. Mark Long of the AP. How are you, Maestro?
I gotta send you another one, I guess. I'm doing well, thanks, buddy. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being on. Late night dilly-dilly to you, my friend. It's a good picture, by the way. I just said if something happened and we lost you, that would be your picture they'd put in the obit. They'd say, God, he was a fighter pilot,
that was good stuff. I got to do that twice. So.
I saw all those pictures online. Hey, look, speaking of takeoffs, Florida's got to take off this weekend to their first road game, the Gators do, and it's a mixed bag, and I know you've been reading the reports, as have I, and you were at the press conference earlier in the week. Just let me step back and let you analyze what you've heard and seen and read, and as you set the stage for this weekend's battle back in the good old Neyland, where once there were some great games.
Yeah. Listen, it was the rivalry, certainly for the SEC East, maybe even for the Gators. Steve Spurrier would disagree. He always thought that Georgia rivalry was bigger, but it's hard to find one that was bigger in the 90s and even the early 2000s for the Florida Gators and the Tennessee Vols. It meant everything in September. It meant who was playing in December in Atlanta. So, and you hope that it gets back there. I think both programs hope that it gets back there, but both are in rebuilding mode. I will say this, the winner of this game certainly gets a little bit of a leg up in that rebuild and maybe, gets a jump start on the other one in terms of getting back to prominence in the SEC East. That's the thing. I mean, both of these schools lost their luster, and as great as that game was last year, at least for the Gators, you ended on a 63-yard touchdown pass from Felipe Franks to Tyree Cleveland. As great as that game was,
one of the best finishes ever. For nothing.
Yeah, it turned out to be pretty meaningless in the grand scheme of things. I mean, two months later, Jim McElwain's at the door, and 2 weeks after that, Butch Jones is fired. So both teams now in rebuilding mode, and and that's why this game's on, not on CBS at 3:30. It's on, an ESPN channel at 7 p.m.
Yeah, it's a big game everywhere except in Gainesville and in Knoxville, and it's a huge game. But around the league, they're more interested in what's going to go on with some of the other games, particularly with Alabama, Texas A&M, and even to a point of Kentucky and Mississippi State. And here's the thing about it. I don't want to be negative Ned here, but I'm looking at my mythical projection of the SEC East. And do you realize, and I'm not trying to spread doom and gloom, Gator fans, if they lose this game and go 0-2, all of a sudden, Florida or Tennessee, depending on who the loser is, drops down near to the bottom feeders of the SEC East. So we already know Georgia's the best. We think Missouri's pretty good, by the way. We know Kentucky can play pretty darn good, and South Carolina's probably going to get better. If those are their first 4 teams in some order, Georgia, Missouri, Kentucky, and South Carolina, that leaves Florida, Tennessee, and Vandy to bring up the bottom. and you go to a bottom feeder when you drop down there with Vandy. So I don't know about that. I think his team is better than that, but that's the kind of thing we're talking about here, why the game is so important.
Yeah, and I think that it is big from that standpoint. But I think people should lower their expectations for this Florida team, buddy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm not trying to be doom and gloom either. And I wanted to say a week ago, I wanted to say that the Kentucky game was a one-off. And I was thinking that for a while, that this was a Kentucky team that had lost 6 straight with the same coaching staff intact. They felt like they should have won last year, felt like they should have won a few years ago, and really came in here with this thing circled for the last few months and came into Gainesville and pushed Florida around a little bit because they were the hungrier team. I really did buy into that. That was my thought. And then I watched Florida last week with Colorado State, and again, it wasn't like Florida didn't play well. They did. They played just fine. I think they wore down Colorado State in the fourth quarter.
And the heat was awful.
Hit a couple big plays. And it made that game seem a lot worse than it really was, or a lot less competitive than it really was. That was a pretty competitive game.
No.
It was. Florida should have put them away, but they didn't. And so now I'm starting to hear some rumors, buddy, just some rumors, some talk, from people that Dan Mullen's not so thrilled with this program, with the players he has. I think he's starting to realize that this is a little bit of a rebuilding project, and he's got some character issue on the team, and he doesn't have a lot of, he doesn't just have a lot to build with. And he kind of hinted at it the other day when he said, I got a lot of Bruce Banners and not enough Incredible Hulk.
Yeah.
And, when you start piecing this thing together, he's ripped on his offensive line a little bit. He's questioned his team's toughness. Now he's talking about having a lot of Bruce Banners. He talks about Felipe Franks not quite picking up the decision-making process, the progression process, the read process. All those things, you throw them together and it paints a pretty bleak picture of this football team for 2018. As you know, I'm on record. I think Dan Mullen's the guy who's going to get this thing turned around. I'm just not so sure it's going to happen this week or this year.
Yeah, and Mark, you're pretty good at projecting things like this, and you pick up on little tidbits and nuances, which is what you're trying to do. Because let's face it, we don't drink beer with Dan Mullen. He didn't tell us that stuff. But there was an interesting quote tonight on Gator Talk, which I'm having a little bit of difficulty trying to draw from what he was trying to get out of it. He says, until we sell out the swamp, we're probably not going to win a championship. That's a chicken and egg thing to me, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But it does. It tells you a lot about, fan interest and that 18 to 20-year-olds, 22-year-olds, really everybody, but certainly those kids respond to, that kind of environment. When people are cheering for you instead of against you, when they're quiet when the offense has the ball and they're rowdy when the defense has the ball. All of that plays into your favor. And I think Dan Mullen's smart about knowing that, if you're going to get the best home field advantage on the planet in the swamp, in Gainesville, Florida, which it's clearly capable of doing it, you got to have that. You got to have 90,000 strong. And it's 80,000's a different story. 70,000's way different. 60,000. Some of the crowds we've seen have been between 60 and 70,000. Not so much maybe this last week. I don't know how much it actually filled out, but it hasn't been what we're used to, what the fans, the old time fans are used to, what these kids deserve really. And until it gets back there, that's when you'll know. But you're right, it is chicken or egg. Which one are they going to come when you're not playing well? You got to play well for them to come. That's really how it works. It's hand in hand.
Yeah. And you're right about Colorado State. I thought about it today, and I said earlier that I thought that the living in Colorado, as I did for many years, as you know, coming to this kind of heat and played in the swamp, for that length of time, Colorado State wilted in the fourth quarter. I don't know that Florida's defense was that good or their offense was good. Those long runs, Pierce's long run, I give them all the credit in the world, look good. But when you analyze those numbers, the Gators got about 28 points on offense, and the special teams and defense and what have you. So you'll take it where you get it, but I'm just saying you have to be realistic about it. And so there's all kind of things going on. I'm hearing now a lot of questions tonight, and I've heard it last night about suspensions. I don't know anything about it. We don't find anything about it. We'll know when they suit up. But you keep hearing people say things. I was talking to Edgar Thompson the other night. He says there's so many people at practice who are not official or not media. They just are there, and they tell things, and stuff gets out better than what we have in the media, So I don't know what that's about. But having said all that, I think you're right. Expectations lowered because, let's face it, all stress is self-imposed, self-inflicted.
Yeah, sure. And the loser of this is going to be under a ton of stress,
right?
Because whoever loses, whether it's Tennessee or Florida, the winner probably 5, 6, maybe 7 wins. The loser probably 5 or 6 might be optimistic. I mean, both of them, you look at their schedules and it's a pretty brutal run. And I think the big thing is these two teams just don't have the talent that they did, even 5 or 6 years ago. Mm-hmm. And I think they'll both, I don't know a ton about Jeremy Pruitt. I do know he's been a very good defensive assistant for a number of years. So you got to think some of that will translate, but not all of it does. I mean, we've been around this league, you and I, long enough to know that not every hotshot offensive or defensive coordinator is a very good head coach.
Exactly
and
right.
So,
exactly right.
you gotta wonder. Dan Mullen's a different story because Dan's done it. Now, this is his 14th year in the league, and he's won championships, and he's taken a less than talented Mississippi State squad to unbelievable heights that program has never achieved, even under Jackie Sherrill. Never achieved anything that it did under Dan Mullen, where they almost rolled out the football and won 9 games every year for the last 6 years he was there. It's unheard of at Mississippi State. So you got to think Florida's got a little bit of a head start over Tennessee. But again, it's not like Pruitt can't catch up. You look at what Kirby Smart's doing at Georgia, and it's very clear if you get the right guy in there, the talent, mix it with the talent, and you can get really good really quick in this league.
For sure. And just a couple more for Mark Long of the Associated Press. Interesting, talking about fans. Josh McCumber, who I think obviously the McCumbers, brings up a point about student ticket sales online. He says that there are 8,000 students short in the stands. And the students are not going. We know part of that. We know part of it is that students just don't like football like they used to, and that they don't they can't use their phones. Now the $6 million Wi-Fi program next year will change some of that. Apparently, you got heat, and you got a situation where you think, look, I got a 90-inch television at home. I got a cold beer in the refrigerator. No bathroom lines. It cost me nothing. And I could be sitting in my house and flipping around, watching other games. There's a million games on TV. Maybe I'll sit this one out. And I totally get that. Because I'm going to be honest, I've done it a few times myself. And you're going to sit there in a small seat. It's not big enough. It's hot. The beer costs whatever. Costs $9, whatever it is. I don't know. It's hot. You can't get to the bathroom. You got to walk a mile to your car, and you got to drive 3 hours to get out to Gainesville. So what's good about that experience? They got to change all that for people. You know what I mean? It's not a great experience.
Well, first off, unfortunately, they don't sell beer at Florida.
Well, whatever you're drinking.
The common folks.
Right.
But yeah, listen, and buddy, you've been around Scott Strickland now 2 years, just like I have. If there's one thing I get from talking to Scott Strickland is the Swamp, Florida Field, is headed for a makeover.
Yeah.
People don't want to hear it. People don't want to believe it, but it's happening. It's not going to happen in the next 5 years. It may not be even the next 10, but I think in the next, 10 to 15 years, that place, we won't recognize it. It's going to get a It's going to get a makeover, and the days of it holding 90,000 are gone. Will be gone.
They're all shrinking now.
Yeah,
I heard Laird Veach.
Everything's going to have a chair back.
Yeah. I heard Laird Veach. I don't know if you know him or not. He's he's the executive, whatever they call him. And he spoke at the quarterback club last week, and he talked about, there was asked a question about stadiums cutting back. And yeah, they're all, Alabama, they're cutting seats out. And one of the things, the seats are too small. They're going to make the seats bigger. They'll drop from 90,000 probably to about 80 or 75, whatever, and make what baseball has done. It was cavernous place and make more restrooms and whatever. And, Veach was at Kansas State when they had a $200 million rebuilding program. Kansas State now. I'm not talking about Clemson. And so it's everywhere. And we've talked about this. Your friend of mine, Jeremy Foley, who he got us behind in the arms race. And they really are not going to make it up, just like their football program. So they're suffering through all that. Look, enough of the negative Neds. Let's talk a little bit about the fact that you got a coach who will spend the time up there, as Mullen did on Monday, describing the issue of what it's like to play quarterback, to take that 10 seconds to pre-snap, read, and then process the information and get the playoff, and how difficult it is for a poor quarterback to do that. And until he gets enough reps, Felipe Franks won't be able to do it fast enough. I thought that was a fascinating comment.
Yeah, listen, it really digs deep into what a quarterback, all the processes he has to go through. It's not just, snap the ball and throw to one guy, snap the ball and check the defensive ends. It is a number of things, pre-snap, post-snap, in a short amount of time, 5 to 10 seconds before the snap of the ball, and then, 1 to 3 seconds after, and you got to have it out of your hand and possibly read 3 or 4 defenders and 3 or 4 receivers to see who's open. It's unbelievably complicated, and you got to worry about the rush, and you got to worry about the snap, and you got to worry about everything else, the clock, and it's really unbelievable. And when you talk about it and think about it and really dig into it, Felipe Franks has done 3 games in Dan Mullen's system, in Dan Mullen's scheme, which is that a lot of it is the RPO stuff that puts a lot on the quarterback's shoulders to read certain keys. And so, anybody who thinks, that's an easy task, doesn't know college football, doesn't know football, period. It's a tough task. It's a tough task to do as a freshman. It's a tough task to do as a senior. And it's certainly tough to do when you just haven't had a ton of experience. What we know about Felipe Franks is, listen, he was on the road. He was away from home 5 games last year. He got benched in 3 of them. It's a tough place to play on the road, and that's why I talk about the lowering of expectations. Still a really young team, a really young quarterback, and all of a sudden you're taking them on the road for the first time. I think people should hope for the best and expect the worst.
All right, that's reasonable. Let's close out with this. You probably don't know much about it than I do. Look at it like this. I think the problem, this 4-game redshirt rule is going to be changed because kids are going to start bailing after the 3rd or 4th game. And we're seeing it everywhere. Florida had one already. Now you have 2 at Auburn all of a sudden. Nate Craig Myers and Jawan Myers left the program. What's going on there? And the other thing is this whole thing with hurricanes. They're going to have to start putting open dates more in the month of in the second half of the season to make up games. Nebraska filled out its schedule today. They'll host Bethune-Cookman on October the 27th. That's going to be a really great game. South Carolina is trying to schedule Marshall. This is a common program. I don't blame them. Make it up. Fans bought the tickets and they can't have the games, and it's an issue. So give me your thoughts about Auburn and whatever you can have to say about the schedule makeups.
Yeah, listen, buddy, we know, everybody knows who's in our position that they have insurance on these games. So it's not about losing money. It is about the fans, getting the fans what they deserve, what they paid for. But it's also about having a win, a guaranteed win. And when you're in Nebraska's shoes and you started 0-2, you better, or whoever, you better have those gimmies, those cupcakes, those mulligans. You better have them in the schedule, or you'll end up 5-6 or 4-7, and missing out on a bowl game. So you want to take out because that's a big deal. That's a big deal for kids. It's a big deal for recruiting. It's a big deal for team building, is to have those practices in December, be able to tell people going into signing day. Signing day now, the middle of December, late December. You want to be able to say from December through those 3 weeks right before signing day that, hey, we're going to a bowl game. Our guys are practicing, preparing for a bowl game. Here's what they're going to get by going to this bowl game. They're going to get all this swag. They're going to get all this cool stuff. All of that plays into kids' decisions. So it's like what we talk about with the chicken or the egg. It's this vicious cycle, and you go missing a bowl game, and it can set you back not just one recruiting cycle. It can set you back 2 or 3 recruiting cycles. So that's why it's important. That's why these teams are making up these games. You want to think it's the right thing to do and whatnot, but the reality is all those games are covered in insurance. And you don't think Bethune fans would rather get their money back than go to watch somebody play Bethune-Cookman? I mean, that's probably, depending on the fan base, that's probably a little bit of a wash at best. But I do think it's because they want that easy win.
Yeah. Auburn, anything about that? Your thoughts about the 4-game redshirt rule?
Yeah, it's interesting. To be honest, buddy, until you said it, you're breaking some ground here for me. I hadn't really put the two together, but when you said that, it gets my head spinning a little bit. And I think, wow, he's absolutely on to something. It's unintended consequences. You see that a lot in the NCAA, the SEC, where they change some rules, and then all of a sudden you don't see the 2 or 3 steps down the road of what it's going to do. And I think you're absolutely right that this is the unintended consequence of trying to do what's right for these kids, and now all of a sudden you're hurting the programs a little bit. But the reality is, it's unhappy kids who want out. And in my world, my thought process has always been the kids should be able to do what they want to do. It's their life. It's their education. It's their football future. The schools had way too much power for way too many years. Yeah.
Well, yes, good points. All right, listen, it's time for you to go and me to go, and we'll see what happens this weekend. You want to give me a score going out before we say goodnight?
Oh, buddy, I've talked myself all week into picking Tennessee, only because Tennessee had that game won last year. They're at least tied, headed to overtime. They should have won a few more in the last 5 years, and I just think it's Tennessee's time. I really do. But I think it's going to be close, 24-20, Vols at home.
Wow, and it was Kentucky's time a couple of weeks ago. It's got to stop giving these times away here. It's Florida's time. They got to do something. Listen, Mark, good stuff as always, my friend. I'll see you next week at the Ball Yard, and hopefully do this again soon with you, my man.
Sounds good. Anytime. Thanks, buddy.
Appreciate it. Mark Long, the AP. I always like Mike talking football, Mark, because he thinks he's a thinker. He thinks about this thing. And, I learned from him by listening to what he has to say. And he has an honest opinion. He's not a sunshine pumper. He doesn't necessarily going to give you what you want to hear. He tries to say it like it is, and he likes to give you his opinion. He did not like Jim McElwain. He called him out early on. He and McElwain did not get along. In fact, early on, almost 2 years, a year before he got fired, Mark Long was asked on radio about McElwain. He said he's like a used car salesman. And my comment was, well, you offended a lot of used car salesmen. That was just a little joke there, okay? I have some good friends who are cool used car salesmen. So my point is, I think Mark is honest, and I like to hear the truth. It's not knocking anybody. Look, having said all this tonight, it's all going to be okay because this is a work in progress. We know this. We get ourselves all excited. Edgar Thompson said last night, I took a page from your optimism a couple of weeks ago when I shouldn't have and picked them to beat Kentucky. And yet we were optimistic. I didn't know Kentucky was that good. I was wrong about that. And, and so we can't project. We don't really know. It's like the stock market. I mean, I'd like to be able to tell you that, hey, go buy some of this Google stock. My wife said today, I had a couple of shares of Google. Why did we sell it? Well, you sell it because you want the money, and you need the money then. So what about we buy this stock? We don't have money to buy stocks, first of all. Secondly, it's a gamble. It's a projection. Anytime you project, you're playing with fire. And so I can't really project except that if I look at a stock and see that it's like this, it's going up and the trending upward, then you have to say, look, this stock is trending upward. I'm going to go with the fact I think it's going to at least hold its ground. I'm going to go with that. I'm going to hold on to it and not sell it, or I'm going to buy more, right? Although they say you should buy it when it's down here. That's why they're making you money in buying stocks. I don't deal in the stock market. But the bottom line is that you can't project Florida. This is why the game is so interesting. And the way we broke it down, what was an aberration that Florida got scored so many points? I didn't think that would happen. But then the special teams and the turnovers and whatever made up the difference. Okay? Is Colorado State better than we thought or worse? Beat Arkansas, but then wilted in the swamp. Was the heat a factor? How good was Kentucky? And until we know the answer to those questions, we can't know how good Florida is or Tennessee. I watched a little bit of Tennessee's game. I didn't see anything that struck me. But I mean, I think they'll play a simple game plan, try to run the ball and play defense, and hope Florida makes mistakes and think they can beat Felipe Franks. This is my thought. I'll pick my score tomorrow, but that's how I feel about it. Okay, I want to get in a couple of words before you say thanks, everybody, for hanging on tonight. Appreciate it very much. We're giving everyone wants to give a final thought. That's okay. Mark Rideout wants to give his take on it. Len Tyndall says he's sticking with 8 wins. We're all making our projections after having said all that. Anyway, so that's that. I want to just say a couple of words here about some folks here. The Ocala Quarterback Club, who's just doing a terrific job, I think. We had our meeting Wednesday night. We had Steve Russell. Props to Steve Russell, by the way. When he got up there, someone was trying to make a point about the quarterback club trying to raise its standards and raise more money to get better speakers. And Steve Russell finally got to say, well, I know where I stand. I won't be back here. And he made a joke out of it. But he did a good job. He did a good job. He told about why his expectations were not high. The quarterback club now has 8 more meetings, and you can get in touch with the quarterback club. Go on to Facebook, look at Quarterback Club, and see what they're about. We're going to be announcing things on the Scott Bradley Trophy soon, and we're being in touch with folks in Daytona and Gainesville and maybe other places, other quarterback clubs, to merge some efforts, to do some things together, to promote, as we say in our slogan, celebrating football past, present, and future. And the club's been around since 1955. So we appreciate the support of people like Dr. Frank Cannon, Ocala Orthopedic Group, and Danny Williams of the Danny Williams Appraisal Team, who do support the club, and we thank them very much for doing that. All right? And then I want to say, my buddies at CD Farms. Excuse me. Well, those were fun days, weren't they, Chris and Tracy? We'll have them again, maybe other ways, other places. And they, of course, have got pasture-fed beef, wonderful fresh vegetables. We'll find out more from Tracy and Chris about the fall crops here in a few weeks. And if you're interested in having a calf or a hog raised right there and be pasture-fed, they'll take care of that for you. And also they'll help you arrange to have it butchered and packaged how you want it. So good folks, go to CD Farms Florida and Facebook and check them out. You have information and you have some knowledge about what they got going on there. As you see, they don't like to have a good time. You can tell they don't like to have a good time. All right. I think that's going to wrap us up for the evening. I'm going to go one more time with our friends from All Florida Sportswear. The new shirts are coming along great, by the way. I saw the colors that were picked out. Can't wait to see those. The Circle 15 shirt, especially for the Ring of Honor coming up. Of course, our G&K shirt with the shield on it. All right, that's going to conclude tonight's ceremonies. Tomorrow morning, don't forget, different time, no show tomorrow night. Football Friday is 11 o'clock in the morning. I may have some things to give away. I may have Terry Bradshaw. We'll pick some scores. We'll make some wagers. We'll hear from the head ball coach. And that, if you, those of you who say no show tonight, remember that's archived on there. When you go to listen to the show at 9 o'clock tomorrow night, just click on Buddy Martin Show page, and it'll be there. You can watch it then instead, okay? I want to say thanks to my guest tonight. Boy, good lineup. The Minister of Information, Graham Hall, and Zach Abolverdi, the new editor of Gator Bait, and, of course, Mark Long. And thank you all for listening and watching, and thank you very much to our sponsors. Have a good night.